Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review Morning Briefing. It is Wednesday, the 10th of July. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined by Joshua Barry. First of all, how's it going, Joshua?
Good, Derek. Not as good as Chris, who's soaking up the atmosphere before the Netherlands versus England. But yes, more Rangers events to discuss today. Sadly, not on the pitch or signing news.
Yep, Chris joins us as well over in Holland, where excitement is building ahead of the big one this evening. Chris tells us they're already on the beers already, Chris.
They were. Myself and my press pack colleagues were having a croissant and a coffee this morning, and the barmaid was pouring the first lagers. Shamefully, from a Scottish press point of view, the lagers were not for us. But we've got a busy day ahead of us, so that will have to wait. But no, the Dutch fans outside the window behind us are already getting in there. They've got the battle fever on, safe to say.
Yeah, looking forward to it. If it's anything like last night's semi, then we could be in for quite a game tonight. And I'm sure it'll be very lively over there this evening. Before we talk all things Rangers, though, just a quick word for our podcast sponsors, MPH Boilers. If you want an award-winning family-run business serving all of mainland Scotland, specialising in top-quality boiler installations and servicing, then these are the guys to go to. So do go and check them out, folks, if your boiler is on the blink. Right, lots to talk about. Where should we start? Let's start with a bit of commotion yesterday with the minutes from the fan advisory board being released by the club. Now, before we get into the stadium situation and other bits and pieces, another thing I think was important to note was Niels Koppen was in attendance at said event, and he noted some interesting points, his vision, of course, for Rangers going forward. He presented slides to the board, giving an insight into the strategy process and general philosophy for recruiting players. And it highlights some key points. I'll just run through them, and I'll come to your good self, Joshua. It's a strong and efficient process with the manager involved. Data and video as a big part of the recruitment process. Balanced squad, age, positions, nationalities, personalities, and value. A dynamic squad to be successful domestically and in Europe. We prioritise high technical quality and athleticism. Players need to be robust, reliable, and focused. Determine key markets where we can be successful. More active in untapped markets. Eye for Scottish market and talents. Retain our best academy talents. Use our platform more to give opportunities to young players and develop them. Buy at the right price, sell at the right moment, recruit players with the ability to make a next step to a Big Five league, stronger contract management, and the club demands winners, robust players that can cope with high amounts of games and intensity of the Scottish game. The club demands winners. Need loads of them, Joshua.
Yeah, I mean, it's a list, Eric, that I think Rangers should have had in place before they appointed Niels Koppen, and every big club should have a recruitment strategy. The difficulty that Rangers have had, and one of the reasons we're in this summer where there is so much disquiet and unrest, and the fan advisory board issue, Derek, that you referenced there, it's just another example of when it rains, it pours, and one thing after another, when Rangers really need to try and change the mood going into this new season, which is going to be difficult regardless. The difficulty that they have had, and the reason that they've now pivoted to a model like the one that we spoke about it before, what Koppen is trying to do at Ibrox and how things are starting to change recruitment-wise. They've had different recruitment policies over the last number of years, different people heading it up, no real figure of continuity. So what you're referencing there, and we discussed yesterday, didn't we, that Koppen and co are having to squeeze a lot of work into one window when ideally you wouldn't be rebuilding a squad or putting a squad through a new stage in one transfer window. The difficulty that you've got is that there has been a very, very different approach last summer where it was a manager-led approach. We've discussed many times before that Michael Beale press conference where he said the line that you'll be able to trace all these players back to me. When you've jolted so dramatically from that transfer model last summer and similar ones in summers before to what you've had now, there is going to be growing pains. I don't think there is much, and again, you can only base it on the evidence of what you see. the noises that we hear and we report, I don't think there is much of an argument that the model that Koppen is trying to introduce, and the one that Rangers have bought into from everything from the transfer board that we've discussed as well, that looks in principle to be a good policy. The question is, how long will it take to bed in? How much are Rangers up against in terms of squad building capacity? Because obviously they've just lost another 5 players in the most recent contract expiry because of the way that the squad has been managed. They're up against all these different things. You've seen with the profile of player that have come into the club already, Derek, that I think there is exciting players in there. The noises you hear are exciting. Again, the difficulty is because Koppen comes into a backdrop of so many different plans, so many different people leading transfers, no real continuity between squads, between playing styles over a number of years, that you get this summer where so much work needs to be done. And obviously it's difficult to do that amount of work in one summer successfully.
Yep, some interesting points in that vision there, Chris. I guess a lot of them are sort of you would expect at a club like Rangers, but he's obviously identifying we need more robust players, and buying at the right price, selling at the right moment is an important factor as well. And so often Rangers, we've seen this summer, of course, a number of players heading out the door under freedom of contract, but it's these key factors that need addressed, don't they, if Rangers are wanting to be successful?
And I think, as Josh outlined there, they are factors that should have been addressed a long time ago. I think everyone would agree with the points that's in these meetings, or it's in these notes. Sorry, I think all those bullet points you read out, Derek, I think the fans would appreciate them. They would all agree with them. But it's like, well, why hasn't that been done previously? Now, Niels Koppen is not the first person to hold that position. Philippe Clement is not the first manager to hold that position. So you have to ask. I think these points are valid and they're good, but they also raise questions of what's been done before, what has been allowed to happen before, to, as Josh said, get Rangers in the situation, another 5 players walking out the door for free at the end of a contract, going into another summer needing a rebuild, $1 million spent on the squad last summer, and the window before that, and the window before that for very little return in terms of silverware. So I think it was encouraging to see that Niels Koppen he's also come in, he's had a time to assess the club and assess various aspects of the football department. If he's good on his word, if he can put processes and people in place to tick all of these boxes, Rangers should be in a better place. Now you have to give Niels the time to come in and actually put his vision across. He's also presented that to the board to get in the club in the first place. Been in the club for a long time now. We now need to start seeing the outcomes here. It's fine saying here's what's wrong. Ultimately, it's how do you fix it? Where will Rangers be in at the end of this transfer window? Where will Rangers be at the halfway point of the season? Ultimately, where will Rangers be at the end of the season? And what's the silverware going to be like? Because that's all that the fans are really interested in. So yes, it's important. Yes, you can be encouraged. And I think any time I've spoken to Niels, I've been impressed with him. I think he does come across well. I think he is the right man for that position. We've written a lot about him on the site over the last few months, certainly after he was appointed. We've written a lot, we've seen a lot, we've heard a wee bit. Now we have to see what he can actually go and put in place.
Yeah, Derek, can I just see that this point here? Sorry, this point here from John, it says, most people could highlight that point. That's true, and if you sit in most board meetings, clubs need to have recruitment strategies. It's finding the players and shipping out the old guard. I think this is the really difficult point of this summer, is when you have a lot of players and a lot of experienced players who have long-term contracts. Koppen, let's say Koppen and Clement, they're not inheriting a clean slate. And I think that is what is going to, as Chris rightly says there, that is what is going to be, I guess, one of the real signposts of whether this has been a successful summer or not, because we hear so much about the importance of structure behind closed doors at clubs above managerial level. We've seen how many managers have come in and out of Rangers in the last 4 years. Again, I think just the most important point to reiterate is think how many playing styles, different visions, different manager visions have been bought into in the last 4 years, how you fluctuated from a sporting director now to a football board with a head of recruitment. Whatever model Rangers are now settled on, again, which seems sensible, which seems to have legs to it, it needs to be given time to be implemented. But the difficulty is, because of the mistakes that have been made in the last few summers, that issue of shipping out the old guard, getting players who are on longer term contracts, to other clubs. That's a really, really difficult thing as well, and an underrated difficulty of the transfer window. And that is something that Koppen inherits because of mistakes before, but it's going to be just as important as getting players in, not least because it obviously helps finance the incomings.
Yep, a lot of consternation as well in that advisory board on the stadium upgrades. And it says the club shared that the Director of Operations and Venues, working with the facilities team and the main contractor, elements of the project are out with our control, and we are working to make sure we have contingencies in place. Everything is going according to plan at the minute. Now, it caused a bit of consternation, as I said, on social media yesterday, Chris, fancy, because it was, I think, 3 days later it was announced, I think, that there was going to be a delay. So you can understand fans' frustrations with regards to that, heading along, being told it's going to plan, and then a few days later it isn't going to plan.
I think that was one of the headline points, if not the headline point, to come out of those minutes that released yesterday. And I think, as we spoke about on the show yesterday morning, I think it was, the Rangers fans deserve full clarity, openness, honesty on timelines, on financial ramifications, on every aspect of this deal. The Rangers fans deserve to know the full story. It's not right that they are being kept in it. Now, of course, the club can't. They might not want to give a running commentary on everything. They won't want to give a blow-by-blow account of discussions with SRU or the SFA or UEFA or other stakeholders in this. But I think it's only fitting right that the Rangers fans are given more insight into, one, how they got here, but more importantly, how the board are going to get them out of this situation. And I think those FAB minutes didn't, knowing what was going to come down the line, knowing how the process had unfolded, knowing what they knew at that stage, it's not a good look to then go into that meeting, put out, knowing that was going to come out afterwards. Obviously, I don't think it's a good look for the board and for the club to present the facts and the timeline in that way. But then, obviously, history then paints a very different picture. So I think that's one lesson that the club have to learn from this. As we said the other day, as Steve said last week, there was a piece from Davey Edgar on the review website this morning. The Rangers fans just deserve full openness, honesty, transparency. If it's bad, tell them it's bad. Treat them like adults. Don't treat them like customers.
Yeah, you can check that piece out in the description below, folks. Well, we're going to let you go shortly, Chris. So just before you do that, there's a great interview on the website as well with Ross McCausland. What can people expect when they read that?
A great interview, as you said, because obviously it was myself that was involved in it, and it's myself that wrote it. So usual standards, new season, same old quality of content. It was good to catch up with Ross Saturday there. He spoke a lot about his first season as a first team player. I think around about October, November time, we had the piece on the site charting his Rangers rise. Spoke to a couple of people that work with him in his formative years, and basically told the story of how this time last summer he went back to Northern Ireland and he went through his own pre-season back on the training pitches where he first fell in love with the game, back in his local community. Fast forward 12 months, he's then back at his dad's RSC, doing a Q&A as a Rangers first team player, has Champions League to look forward to, he's got a League Cup medal. I don't think it was an outstanding season for him. I think there were moments there where he will be disappointed, certainly collectively in terms of Scottish Cup and also the league. But I think overall he was one of the positives that you can take out the campaign. Really interesting to see how he can kick on during this season. And he mentions that himself in that piece. He's going to be judged differently. He's no longer going to be Ross McCausland, youngster coming into Rangers first team. If he wants to be an established Rangers player, he has to step it up. He has to be as strong as possible. I think that's definitely something that he can learn from last season. He has to take that forward into this season as well. So no, good to catch up with him. The first interview of the pre-season tour, and plenty more to come over the next couple of days.
Yeah, I was going to ask it before you head off. What does your day look like today?
going to go and mingle with some of the locals, go and soak up a bit of the big match atmosphere. I won't be able to get a beer right now. Unfortunately, there is work to be done later on. But no, Rangers are playing a bounce game this afternoon, so I'm going to hopefully go up and see that, and we'll do some coverage on the site later on. And I think I'll be catching up with Josh for another video out and about later on. So I'll keep your eyes peeled on the YouTube channel, and keep an eye out on the site and all our social medias later on. And we'll full coverage of the day. I saw comments coming in asking about plans for this, the trip, more media access tomorrow. So hopefully hearing from the manager and a couple of players tomorrow. Safe to say the manager has a number of points that have to be addressed over the course of the trip. So hopefully we can get a proper sit down, a proper catch up with him. So plenty of coverage from the manager, players, and also ticking all the boxes in terms of the games to come as well. So plenty to look forward to, and we'll see how the day goes in terms of mingling with the locals.
Yeah, good stuff. Right, well, we'll let you go, Chris. You're a busy man today, so thanks for coming on the show as ever. So there he's heading off, but unfortunately not going to the bar, as many Dutch people are getting ready for tonight. Just before we go back to Rangers, Joshua, how do you see it going this evening?
Which the Rangers bounce game
yeah, of course.
I see people asking. It's not televised, but we'll have if you stick with us on our channels, we will have some coverage of the games. So and that sounds a bit cryptic. It's not really where we'll be live later on at some point with Chris. Yeah. I watched. It was a good game last night. How do I see it going today? Don't know. I kind of fancy. I think the Netherlands have looked a bit better, but England seem to be able to win games late on. I don't know. What do you think? I'm going to say the Netherlands. I'll be a bit controversial. I
think it's probably 50-50, pretty much like England, Switzerland the other day there. I think it could go all the way, but I fancy Spain to go on and win it. I think that by head and shoulders the best team in that competition. So looking forward to it later. But let's get back to why people are tuning in, and it's because we want to talk about Rangers. There's a few comments I want to flag out. Just going back to the stadium situation, Denzel, what I thought was an interesting point, says surely the level of money being spent on infrastructure projects will negatively impact the player budget. We should have made sure we had a winning team on the park first. I've heard this from a number of supporters, incidentally, that feeling that Rangers should have been looking at improving the first team squad rather than out with an infrastructure, as Denzel says. So I think it's a casing point, and if Rangers don't win the league this season, then it'll be brought up, I'm sure, throughout the course of the campaign if Rangers are failing. Another point that I've seen that got messages yesterday, Joshua, by lots of people about James Tavernier. You know how people look into pictures at pre-season and ask where players are if they aren't pictured or aren't in the videos. James with a point. Tav seems missing in all the Rangers videos Rangers are releasing. Can we read anything into that? Did see a picture of him on an exercise bike, but people are saying he's not involved in the little games that they play and what have you. I wouldn't read too much into that. If he's on the bike, sometimes if he's not involved in the action stuff, he may just be nursing a knock or what have you. I remember when I was in Portugal for Rangers pre-season camp, there was a number of players that were on bikes as opposed to contact stuff. John Suter was one. I'm sure there was one or two others that were doing their own sort of programs. I wouldn't read too much into it, Joshua. Would you? I know we all know there's noise around Tavernier and interest in Saudi Arabia, whether a move materialises or not, who knows? But I wouldn't read much into not seeing him in training videos.
I think probably what James is touching upon here, and it's similar to what Chris is saying as well, is people aren't stupid and they can read the mood music. Now, clubs can't come out for it. Let's say, for example, that Rangers wanted to get rid of 10 to 15 players, and we know that they do, in an ideal world, want to change a large percentage of that squad. They want more leaders. That's a word when you speak to people that continually comes up about leadership on the pitch. We know that Todd Cantwell is someone who he's someone who there's still value to him as a Rangers player. We know that he can be a really good player on his day, but he's not a player who, if the right offer came in, Rangers would not listen to that offer. And there's a lot of players in that vicinity. There's a lot of players who their futures maybe aren't completely concrete. James Tavernier, he's been here, 9 seasons, and in the past it has always been definitive, no, he will not leave. He's very much front and centre of everything Rangers do. So that when that changes, when there's a lot of noises about his future, when there's someone like Dujon Sterling there, who we touched upon this earlier in the week, I think that his best position long term, while he's been really effective in the middle of the park, his highest ceiling career-wise could potentially be at right back. And there's a question about, I mean, you can't go into the new season not playing Dujon Sterling there. So when all these situations are around a player like James Tavernier, and again, Rangers, they can't come out and say in their pre-season video, look, here's who we want to get rid of, so they're not going to be in many pre-season videos. I guess you just got to, in theory, manage that situation to a degree. And it depends what offers come in for different players. Cyril Dessers is someone who's in a similar boat. We know how much Rangers want for him. We've discussed Sam Lammers at length, and he will presumably, or is expected to go back to the Netherlands. So that is what I would say to it. Very similar to the stadium situation. People they know when there is a wider situation at hand. I do think Stuart Campbell's point here, that the disabled access badly needed addressing, is really important, and that's important to bring up, especially if you've been someone who's been impacted by that. I guess similar to the new Edmondson House, these projects, when stuff isn't going right on the pitch, are always going to face more scrutiny, not least when, as is materialised with the stadium situation, you have the really negative impact of the fact that you're not in your stadium at the start of the season. People have paid a lot of money for season tickets. They don't know where they're going next month. All the issues that we've discussed at length, but it is probably important to note that the work did need to be done. It's just, as we've discussed, what has happened since has been far from ideal.
Yeah, poor. On Tav, I know folks saying that the Saudi market opens on the 17th. I'm sure if he's not part of the Rangers side in the upcoming pre-season matches today, of course, the closed doors match, and then Ajax, we'll hear from the manager as to why he's not part of those teams. Watch this space with regards to that. Another one, CGM55 says that Adam Devine didn't go to Holland. He was captain of the B team yesterday. Well done to the B team. They thrashed Blackpool by 6-1 at the Rangers training centre. But Devine not part of that pre-season camp. Reading between the lines, Joshua, that would look like his future is not going to be at Ibrox. We know he spent the second half of the season, last season, on loan at Motherwell. If he's not part of the team over in Holland, I can't see him being part of the squad this season.
Yeah, and again, we'll find out a little bit today, but also with the televised game against Ajax on Saturday, isn't it? Where does Dujon Sterling play? Because if he plays at right back, that is, I think that could happen. That obviously gives you your two players in that position. So one to watch there, but yeah, as the commenter rightly points out, it is noticeable that he is not on this trip because he has obviously been on them in the past when he's been younger.
Yeah, so I think he could be heading for the exit door. Another player that looks to be heading for the exit door is Cyril Dessers. Reports in Italy last night, Joshua, that Cagliari in Serie A are keen on bringing him back to Italy, and Rangers, of course, looking to recoup the £4.5 million he paid Cremonese. Whether that prices Cagliari out of a move, who knows? But every passing day, there seems to be another club that is keen on Cyril Dessers. He certainly is a man in demand, and that will benefit Rangers because I think they'll be easy to deal with if he's looking to move on. And let's hope a bit of a bidding war opens up with regards to him. I think this point we touched on earlier about Niels Koppen, about buying at the right price and selling at the right time. I think this is probably the right time to sell Cyril Dessers. Would you agree?
Yeah, it is. And Rangers want another striker. That would obviously make up a complement of three. They only play with one striker, with Gamane and Danilo. And if Dessers is to go, if the Rangers are to get that fee that they initially paid for him, again, to reiterate a point you made yesterday, I think it would be good business to get back the money for Lammers and Dessers collectively because of how they started. Dessers has moved a lot in his career, and he's now, is he 29 or 30? He's either just turned 29. Yeah, so I mean, his value isn't going to increase as he's going to score 22 goals next season. Probably not, because he's probably not going to be Rangers starting striker. He's on a longer deal. his value then decreases. It is clearly the right time to sell him and try and reinvest that into younger players, as we've seen right throughout the squad. Again, the issue though is timing, Derek. When can you sell him by? How does that impact who you bring in? If you sell him slightly sooner, do you miss out on some of the revenue from that? He got 22 goals last season, and if you looked at it from the outside looking in, you'd say he got 22 goals, probably about 10 assists, maybe something around that ballpark. Scored a couple of big goals, got recalled to the national team. From the outside looking in, it looks like a brilliant season, and there was elements of it that were effective. We know what he's like as a player. He's not a player who you watch and think, I think always aesthetically that he's the best striker in the world, but I also don't think you can argue in a poor Rangers team that he wasn't relatively effective at points as well. If the money comes in and it is right, if you were to speak to the majority of people watching this, I'm sure they'd say it would be the right time to sell Cyril Dessers, because he's not going to play as many minutes, he's not going to score probably as many goals. You want to maximise his value. The question is, when is the right time to sell, and how does that impact what player you try to get in? Because the whole backdrop of this transfer window is that, as we keep coming back to, you've got those 9 games in August. You need to win most of them. And if you don't win most of them, you put yourself in a very difficult situation. And the squad, speaking on July 10th, is still quite far away from what most people would have envisioned it would be at the end of this transfer window.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I remember when Čolak scored what, 20 goals in his season at Rangers. I did not want him to leave at the time. Dessers have scored, a couple more, and we're saying, take the money and move him on. But I would take Antonio Čolak over Cyril Dessers. I don't know if you agree, Josh, or if anyone in the comments agrees. I would. I don't know why. There's not any high-profile misses, I think, for me with Antonio Čolak. That's the thing. It's the misses that sort of are highlighted when you think of Cyril Dessers, even though his goal record, as you say, is pretty decent last season. So let us know, though, folks.
I think one of Dessers, what works for him, he's not like, you don't look at him and think he's fast, but he is quite a clever player when he presses. Yeah. And I'm told that is something that it is, when you're looking at what type of players you want to sign, what type of players Rangers want to sign, the off-ball work of a striker for Clement style of football and just modern football in general. But that is something that is really, really important. So again, Dessers isn't someone you look at and you think he's lightning quick, but he does a lot of work. And maybe in Old Firm games especially, with him and Campbell up top, I don't think that was always the best dynamic when you're trying to press a team. But I think that is something that's worked for him. But yeah, I mean, if you can get that fee, if you can recoup the money that you shelled out last summer, you can mark that off as last summer's business and try and reinvest it in just a more sensible manner. Because if you're going to spend that much money on a player at that age within Rangers' budget, or 2 players within that age range when you include Lammers, who's 26, slightly younger, they need to, I think, be pretty transformative to the way that Rangers play. And it would be, I think, a sensible way to reinvest that money elsewhere, wouldn't it?
Yeah, just on that, the Čolak miss, potential misses, John says that Motherwell miss from Čolak was worse than any Dessers. Can't recall that one. Where was that? Ibrox or Fir Park?
Well,
was it?
If I'm thinking of the one that John's talking about, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, it was the 4-2 game under Beale.
Yeah.
And it was when they were kind of playing in split strikers. So Čolak, at points in those games, was playing as like a right winger off the ball, and John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that one. He was a good finisher. He was very much like a box player, wasn't he? And someone who, but then he didn't get many minutes outside of the start of that season.
Well, as Blair says, he scored 18 goals, was getting a goal every 92 minutes. Never should have sold him. It hasn't quite worked for him at Parma. I think somebody said he's only scored 3 goals last season. But the CGM says he was a natural finisher. He was cold in front of goal, didn't fluff chances. That's the thing I remember of Antonio Čolak. You could, more often than not, he would bury opportunities in front of goal. But interesting debate nonetheless. Right, that'll do us there, folks. As we touched on a little earlier on, there's a great piece from David Edgar on the site. Go and check it out. The link is in the description below. There's also a brilliant interview, as Chris mentioned, with Ross McCausland on there, and plenty of content to come both on the website and on the YouTube channel over the course of the next few days. So we'll wrap up there. Big thanks to Joshua as ever, and thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to the show. Joshua and Chris will be back a little bit later on, and I will speak to you again tomorrow. Bye for now.